We've had quite a whirlwind of Lumix announcements lately. Earlier this year, we got the announcement of the S1R Mark II, and now more recently, we've got the S1 Mark II announced, along with the S1HII, and a cool new lens, the 24-60 f2.8, all of which I'm very excited for, but one thing lingering in the background is the idea of an S1H Mark II, and for that matter, what about a GH8? But before we get started, like this video, hit the subscribe button and consider joining the channel. Channel members get exclusive access to Filmmaker Alchemy, behind-the-scenes lessons and insights on the business of video production. Learn how to turn your content into gold. It's always interesting how things break down in hindsight. Now that the S1 Mark II and the S1HII have been announced, it's obvious, of course, they were coming. The S1R2 was just for high-resolution photography. But if you remember, when the S1R2 was announced, there was a lot of people saying in the comments and on forums that this was it. This was going to be the S1 camera. There was no S1 II coming. It was just the S1R2. Always was, always is. This is the new hybrid. It does video, does photo, it does everything. Why would you ever want an S1 II? Well, then you're scratching your head going, well, what's the R for? That doesn't make any sense. And sure enough, the S1 II was announced, and all those people, those comments, they all just disappeared, and whoop, we all just forgot. But I remember distinctly around the time of the S1R2, there were people saying this was the one and only flagship camera from Lumix. But now, obviously, that's silly. We've got the S1 II and the S1HII. But sure enough, there's lots of people down in the comments on the forum saying, an S1H2, that's not coming. This is it. The S1R2, the S1 II, that's it. That's all there is. There's no S1H. They haven't promised anything. There's nothing rumored. There's nothing speculated. We're not going to get it. It's not going to come. They're just doing the S1 II and the S1R2. Maybe there's like some crazy slim percentage chance that we never get an S1H Mark II, although that would be astronomically stupid considering the original lineup for the S1 cameras was the S1, the S1R, and the S1H. All three existed, all three had a purpose, and now we're seeing the life cycle repeat by getting the Mark II versions of each of these cameras. It would be foolish for Lumix not to make an S1H Mark II, considering it is probably the most hyped, most anticipated camera I think really anyone has ever seen. I can't think of a more hyped and speculated and popular camera that everyone is on the edge of their seat waiting for. Even though the S1R2 and the S1 II both look great, I'm still shooting on the S5 II, getting a lot of value out of it. But everyone is waiting for that S1H Mark II. And it got me thinking, is there any demand for a GH8? I made a video recently talking about how great the GH7 is, and even compared to the S1 Mark II, the GH7 still holds its own, even for micro four thirds. Yes, they're different. The sensor size, the lenses, obviously there's some differences. The S1 Mark II does have a few tricks up its sleeve, but for the most part, the GH7 is about the best camera you could ever imagine if you're willing to shoot micro four thirds. And you probably should shoot micro four thirds. There's a lot of great lenses. There's a lot of great functionality you can get out of that system. Considering open gate on micro four thirds is 4:3, you get more vertical resolution than you do on full frame open gate, which is limited to 3:2, which the difference between 4:3 and 3:2 is actually quite drastic, certainly compared to 16:9. So if you ever are curious and you want to pull up those different aspect ratios and break them down, you get a lot more value for vertical out of 4:3. But some people want full frame 3:2. I certainly am one of them as well. There's times when I shoot with my S5 Mark II and get the full frame look. And there's other times where I shoot with the micro four thirds GH7 for all those benefits that it provides. So I leave it open up to you. Down in the comments, let me know. Are you more excited for a GH8 or an S1H Mark II? I think I can kind of guess what everyone would say. I think most people are probably excited for an S1H Mark II, but let me know if I'm wrong. Maybe there is demand, maybe there is appetite for a GH8. I just don't know what it would be, aside from some of the crazy new features that we all wish and fantasize and speculate about. Some kind of internal ND system would go a long way in keeping micro four thirds alive, but beyond a radical shift in the physical design and functionality of the camera, I don't know what a GH8 would even mean. What more could they do? Open gate 60, true open gate 60, full frame, not full frame, full sensor micro four thirds. OpenGate 60, that would be really nice. More expanded codecs, better video functionality, faster frame rates. Yeah, all that's good, but the GH7 already has about the best we're going to get, I think, for the time being. And I don't know that anything beyond that would really get people excited, other than the fringe cases where they just want more frame rates or, more dynamic ranges. More is always more, but it also gets to the point where it's diminishing returns. There's some cool stuff like additional USB-C ports. That's one thing I'd love to see in an S1H Mark II beyond the S1II and the S1R2 is just 2 USB ports. That way we can do power in and video out via USB-C. I think that'd be really smart. I'd love to see a proper fan thermal cooling system in an S1H Mark II compared to the rest of the S1 Mark II lineup as it currently exists. None of them are really sold or marketed on their ability to withstand overheating. So I certainly think there's room for an S1H Mark II to fit that spot. We could talk about things like, the card slots, CF Express Type B for both slots, maybe, depending on the video functionality. Maybe there's something crazy like an internal ND system. That would be great. Maybe we potentially get 32-bit float internal, but there must be something holding them back, or just their commitment to the XLR2 adapter that's having Lumix lean into that system, or maybe it's some kind of patent. I don't actually quite know, but it's something I want to investigate further, is why all of the 32-bit float audio systems, when they come to cameras, always require some kind of accessory or adapter. It's never just built right into the 3.5, internal audio. Maybe there's some limitation there. Maybe it is a patent. I don't know, but we have all of these audio recorders that can do 32-bit float, and yet on the camera side, they all require some kind of adapter. I think that's kind of silly and stupid long term. Maybe we'll see a solution to that in the 3rd generation of these cameras. But an S1H Mark II would also benefit from proper timecode, a physical port. We got Bluetooth timecode on the S1 Mark II, but there's no port. There's no way to plug it in outside of the audio, which, if you're doing timecode, you usually don't want to sacrifice that on your main primary camera. So an S1H Mark II with a timecode port would also be really nice. There's plenty of room for the S1H Mark II to show its strengths outside of whatever the sensor is capable of doing. Is it the same sensor as the S1II, the S1R2, something different, something new? I don't know. Maybe we'll never know. But there's certainly room for the S1H Mark II to exist. And like I said, it'd be really stupid for Lumix not to follow through on that, the 3 tiers of the flagship line on the S1 series. You just follow it up. It's intuitive. It makes sense. And there's plenty of room for it. I think it's going to happen at some point. But I also want to know what's next for Micro Four Thirds. Is the GH7 the pinnacle, the final flagship of Micro Four Thirds from Panasonic, or is there still room for a GH8? And what would that even be? The GH7 has a lot of those things that I'm describing about an S1H Mark II. The GH7 has the exhaust fan thermal management system built right in. It has the flash sync port for timecode. It has these features that I would love to see on the S1H Mark II. So what value would those things add to a GH8? Of course, they should stay. They should be along for the ride. But what more could we want aside from, again, an internal ND system, which I think is the final missing piece of the puzzle for me, for a lot of hybrid shooters out there. We just want internal NDs. I'm sick of, you can do some stuff with flip away filters, variable NDs, all this stuff. There's always a downside. There's always a compromise. There's always that little bit of irritation, how cumbersome it is to switch a filter. There's clip-in filters now. I want a proper internal ND, electronic ND mechanism. It would be very, very nice. And just that perfect, the final piece of the puzzle that would solve so many problems for so many of us, because you see a lot of shooters out there looking to the bigger, more expensive, heavier systems, like something like an FX6 from Sony, just because it has that internal ND. It does make a difference for run and gun, for documentary, for weddings, for reality, whatever you're shooting. And I focus a lot on that, on stuff that's happening in real life. And this kind of goes back to a recent video I did talking about AI and why AI is coming for a lot of jobs, but I think there's also some safety and security if you're shooting things that are real, because it's the one thing AI can't do. AI can make stuff that looks like real life. Google's new VO3, or however you say it, their new model for video with audio is quite impressive. There's a lot of content out there, people using it to be creative, but AI can't shoot your wedding. It can't make a documentary about something in real life because it's just not the mechanism for how it works. It can make something that looks like it. It can give you stock footage. It can give you supplemental B-roll, but it can't actually be there in real life capturing the moment like a camera can. So those are the things that I want to double down on, that I want to invest in, real life, the authenticity outside of a computer. That stuff that photographers, videographers, cinematographers has always been there as part of the work, but there's also the other kind of fictional side of the work, the narrative, the short form, the music video, the whatever. That's not quite a representation of real life, superheroes and wizards and all that kind of stuff. So I'm curious to see, what are you most excited for? A GH8, an S1H Mark II, something else? What features would you want? Why would you want them? How would you use them? There's a lot of benefits to just having the functionality built right in because it allows you to be more creative. A lot of people are frustrated online that we talk so much about gear and specs and all the technicals and all the features, and no one's actually doing anything with it. Well, if you're doing something with these cameras, chances are it's not what you're showing on your YouTube channel. So I am excited for everyone out there who is actively, shooting, creating, being productive, making the content, making their art. And I think there's room to talk about the technicals, the specs, the features, because that's what fuels that creativity. I've always looked at them as kind of a yin and a yang. You need both. You can't just be purely creative without having a good technical understanding, but you can go too far down the rabbit hole of technicals and not do anything with it, or what you create isn't all that interesting. Finding that balance, using them to fuel each other in kind of a never-ending cycle is where I like to find myself. So when I'm looking forward to those new features, the cutting-edge technology, the internal ND, I'm not asking for it just because I want it to be there. I want it there so I can actually use it to create the content I know in the past I've been able to achieve with external filters or whatever it might be. But when you bring that into the camera, I think of how much faster I can be, how much more efficient I can be, and all the great things I can do because now I have more time to be creative, focusing less on switching a filter, spending time doing that, and more time being creative, producing the content that I want to make.